Now, one of those issues, of course, has been gang legislation, and it's fascinating that this indeed, the attempt to attack New Zealand gangs in this country and to try and bring them under some form of control has played out just most recently in the last 24, 40 hours within the Labour Party with this amazing, if you like, insight into conflict between Cabinet Ministers Stuart Nash, Kerry Allen, Willie Jackson, Gosh Crookskin's been brought into it as well, to do with the legislation that's intended to strip assets away from gang members. That reverses the burden of proof, and it says you've got to prove you got that through legal means, and otherwise we'll take it away. And we all know what that has said in the last 24 hours. It's been a very bitter policy, I might add, very personal in the last 12 hours. But the gang legislation will be introduced. That was confirmed over the weekend. It is widely considered by some, and this is not me, but by some to target Maori, so that has been the allegation that is somehow racist. Others have said, well, it's going to be largely ineffective, and others again have said, well, whatever happened to individual rights and civil rights, I guess the same individual civil rights that were denied so many people during the COVID inquiry, but COVID shutdown, but that's another story. Bringing us through this is one of New Zealand's leading legal academics, somebody I deeply respect and admire, the former Dean of the Otago Law School, still now at Auckland Law School, Professor Mark Henaghan, and he joins us now. Mark, lovely to have you on the show again. Welcome.
Lovely to hear your voice, Mike. I can still hear you debating in the town hall, setting up those Bank of New Zealand Festival debates. You were the beginners of those debates, and you did an outstanding job with humour and finesse.
Thank you, my friend. Now, listen, you are still teaching law at Auckland, yes?
Yep. I had my first classes yesterday. A lovely day to start off. I started off with my family law class, and we had a lot of fun discussing all the sad things that are happening in families. But it's the students are fantastic. People complain about students, but I think they are, especially in the summer months, enthusiastic and keen, and lots of questions and lots of ideas. And the whole purpose of university is to get students to learn to think for themselves, and as soon as they start doing that, that should be the purpose of schools as well. But I think things like NCA have sort of got them into the idea that once you get a template, you just have to learn it. Learning things is a helpful skill, but thinking for yourself is a far more helpful skill for society.
Absolutely. And in actual fact, my daughter had her first lectures this week. She's at Auckland University. She had a gap year and she's gone to Auckland, so she's chosen your university as the place to be. She's passed by Otago.
What's she doing?
She's actually doing, no, she's not doing law. She's doing philosophy, classics, psychology, history and English.
I think philosophy should be compulsory for all students. It's a thinking subject, really important. Tell her to come and see me. I'd love to just say hello.
Yeah, I will, Mark. Thank you.
All about her fine father.
Hey, good on you. Well, there, it should be nice to have some positive publicity. Hey, listen, Mark, first of all, I wanted to talk to you specifically about the Bill of Rights Act, gang legislation and insignia, burden of proof, what the law is and what's proposed to be changed. Can we go back to this? The argument is that the Bill of Rights applies also to gang members. I saw an editorial, ironically, just on that matter in the Otago Daily Times a couple of days ago. Is that true, that the Bill of Rights Act would prevent the government from bringing in this legislation, or that they would be in contravention of it?
No, we don't have an overriding Bill of Rights like America does. I mean, in America, the Supreme Court can override decisions made by Congress, but our Act doesn't go that far. It wasn't designed to go that far, because I don't think Aotearoa New Zealand would be prepared to accept that at this stage, that judges should actually have the final say on policy. So the courts can make a decision. They've taken this power upon themselves, and we discussed last week at a conference, where they can say any legislation, some legislation they could say is inconsistent with the rights in the Bill of Rights Act. That's as far as they can go, and then Parliament can look at that and say, well, that's fine, we've had the court's ruling, but we're going to go ahead with it anyway. So it cannot stop it, but the courts can make a declaration, it's called, that it's inconsistent. They have to give reasons for that if it's inconsistent, but there's no power in the courts via the Bill of Rights Act to say no, you cannot pass that legislation. Some people, for example, when the three strikes legislation came out, some people thought that was an infringement of the Bill of Rights. It can be challenged, but at the end of the day, the Parliament has the last. Parliament, it's in the Supreme Court Act. Parliament is sovereign, so Parliament has the last word. So it goes through Parliament. Nothing the courts can do about it. They have the power to interpret law, and in the Three Strikes Act, they did interpret it in a way that it had less effect later on, because the courts thought it wasn't very fair. But at the end of the day, they cannot overrule what Parliament decides.
Okay, so in this particular, and I guess things like, for example, just the confiscation of gang property over $30,000, of itself, that would be in contravention of the Bill of Rights, wouldn't it? You've got to prove that you're innocent rather than that's the presumption.
Yeah, that's a normal thing. I mean, it's very rare to have presumptions of guilt, but there are some. It's very, very rare. It's seen. The basic tenet of our criminal law is that basically you're innocent till proven guilty rather than guilty and prove your innocence. But we do have things like strict and sometimes absolute liability, where you do the act and there's really no defence to it if you've done it. So we do have some fairly strict laws that in situations where it's justifiable. One of the things about the Bill of Rights Act, it does say that you can be inconsistent with the Bill of Rights Act if it's appropriate in a free and democratic society. So the counter-argument to this is a breach of the Bill of Rights Act say, well, it might be, but in a free and democratic society, it's more important that we do this rather than necessarily hold the right. Because no rights are absolute. No rights are absolute. Every right has a counter-argument to it. And while rights are very important, they're not absolute. And in a free and democratic society, sometimes we do. For example, people have to wear safety belts. Well, my freedom of expression has been interfered. I don't want to wear a safety belt. Well, we require it now. People can be fined to wear it because we believe it's important for their safety. We seek to say it's important not to use self, but it's my right to use mine. No. So a lot of rights can be, in a free and democratic society, for safety reasons, for all sorts of reasons, can be said the right comes second. In the free and democratic society, it's more important that we do that. So that's what the debate would be about.
So in this particular case, obviously, gang insignia, gang patches, they're pretty important psychologically, I've discovered, too, though, why they are being targeted by this new legislation that will be introduced. One of the great arguments that's already being used is that this is a breach of these gang members' civil rights, freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Mark, I guess what you're saying is, well, it's a balancing act here. Is their freedom of rights, individuality, their freedom of expression more important than the deleterious effects of their expression? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, just taken to a different context. Some people like nudity. They might say, well, I'd rather walk around naked. Well, we'd say, because that's my way of expressing myself. Others would say, no, the children and other people around, the freedom of expression in that respect is limited. Yeah, so there's lots of examples. Nothing is totally, open to free expression. So that would be the balance the courts would have to look at, and the politicians would debate. I mean, for gang members, and I understand their position totally, would be their freedom of expression is important. It's important to them, and therefore they'd seen it be. And the issue would be, can we target a particular group and say you can't free express in the way you dress in public? Can we do that? Would be an infringement of that right? Absolutely. The question then would be, is that justified in free and democracy? Are there more important things for the society than the free expression of gang members?
All right. Now, academics are already saying, or some academics that I've read in the last 72, 96 hours, Mark, are already saying gangs will be able to challenge these bans in the court. What will they be able to challenge?
Well, they would challenge it, and they can challenge it. They would challenge it in the courts. I'm sure they will, and they're entitled to. And basically, their challenge will be that this. And I think there's been was it you in Wanganui that the gang patch thing?
Yeah.
And it was challenged in court, and I think the court did rule it was inconsistent with their rights. But that doesn't stop Parliament still going ahead with the law. But it means that Parliament is on notice that you are acting inconsistently with rights of a group of citizens, and they have to bear the political consequences of that. Basically, that's how it works.
Actually, in Wanganui, the argument was we were a bylaw, we weren't the law. So it was a council. So if we'd been the government, then it wouldn't have been challenged. And also the other argument, Mark, was that Well, okay, they can challenge it, but the courts couldn't possibly uphold it, could they? They would just simply point to Parliament and say, well, Parliament's sovereign. They know exactly what they're doing. They put aside the Bill of Rights Act. End of story. So what's the point?
No, what the courts would do, and this is the argument, what the courts would do through the right to do a declaration, they can write a judgment which points out the importance of the expression of the right to express yourself, points it out and looks at the arguments as to whether or not it would be justified in a free and democratic society. They can go through all that. Parliament has that in front of it, and that can be used by politicians to say, well, Parliament went ahead with the majority in this, but in terms of the Rights Act, it is inconsistent, and we'll change it if we become the government or whatever. So that's how the debate would play out. So the courts can make a clear, strong statement on it with justifications after hearing full argument on it. I won't predict which way they would go, but they can make that full statement. So it doesn't have the force of law in terms of overriding Parliament. It has the force of saying, well, in terms of a free and democratic society, we believe rights are important. When should we sacrifice those rights?